Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Follow Your Passion podcast. And today I have a fellow podcaster as a guest, and his name is Stuart McConnell. And Stuart, he's a content consultant. So he's helped business owners that feel stuck growing their brand and clientele, and he does it with great podcast content. So I better watch my words because I'm now the guest I'm the host and he's my guest. So Stu's style of consulting is truly unique. He's striving to better understand and serve his clients in order to help them craft their brand into something fulfilling and meaningful. Stu is eager to dig deep into clients' businesses in order to target what holds them back. Stu is an energetic, curious person who loves to learn about clients' content needs through meaningful conversation. And I love to have the conversation with him because I've been in his podcast as well. So welcome, Mr. Stuart McConnell. How are you doing?
Erwin, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm doing great today, and I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. So Stuart, about branding, how did you become passionate about helping other entrepreneurs or other people to help them with the branding, to stand out from the crowd?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking me that. I've always been passionate about educating and or helping people. Going back 10, 12 years, I actually started my professional career in education. And it was the teaching of English as a second language in South Korea. And at the same time I was over there teaching, I started my own business, which was an educational based business. So I was really immersed in teaching others. And I think it just grew out of that love of, watching people go from nothing to reaching certain points of success in their education that I love to see, and all the milestones they hit along the way. It was just amazing to watch people grow. And at first, it's interesting because at first you don't realize it, that you're helping them, or you don't realize really what you're doing until you're able to see them get to a certain point. You're like, wow, I might be actually good at this. Or you start taking some compliments or listening to feedback where it's positive feedback or whatever feedback it is, but you start listening to what people are saying, you start realizing that you are actually loving what you do or passionate about what you do. And anyways, back to, I digress, back to it. I would say it just really grew out of that. And then I started to dive into what brands do in terms of success and why they brand a certain way. For example, everything in South Korea is branded. I mean, they have names on everything. They love that. They love names on their apartments. Just everything from A to Z is a brand. So I was always curious, does that help sell? I mean, does it help sell something? Does it move product? And in America, we don't do that as much, but we still love, popular brands. So that was my first fascination. And then I started to, connect with other people that were a coach or a consultant or something, and they had pain points that they couldn't get over. And the more I educated myself on how to help them get through those pain points, that's how I really started to get into also podcasting.
Yeah, nice. And how did you end up in Korea? Because that's not your original, that's not your roots, right?
No, to say the least, Erwin. No, it's not. It's a long story. No, it's a long story, and I'll boil it down to a short story. I took a chance. I was unhappy in my career, what I was doing before I went to Korea. The interesting part was I had friends when I was in university. They were all from foreign countries. They were from across the globe, mostly Turkey and China. And towards the end of our education, they would say, "Hey, Stu, why don't you come over and look into working in Turkey or working in Taiwan or something. This was back when that kind of information was not widespread. So you really had to dig for it or go through an agency, or is much more time consuming.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2 or 3 years later, I was working in project management and feeling a sense of just kind of unhappiness, unfulfillment, and not on a day-to-day level. It just got to a point where it was a day-to-day level of unhappiness and unfulfillment. And I saw an advertisement, go live in Korea, go work, go live in Korea. I called the guy up. He was an agent that connected people with educational facilities in South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it. I talked to him. I thought about it for about a week, maybe a few days. And I just said, you know what? If I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. I came home. I told my mom and dad. They thought I was crazy. They're like, what? And and that was it. And then I hopped on a plane, and I wasn't scared. I really wasn't scared until I was landing at the airport thinking, what am I doing? But that's how I got there. It ended up, changing my life.
Yeah. Nice. It also reminds me of my first job was like a help desk employee, and the company that I started working for, they went from Microsoft DOS and WordPerfect towards Windows 95 and Microsoft Office, and I had user experience with Windows and Microsoft Office. So I thought, well, that should be an easy job, right? And it actually was, but it wasn't when I started training the employees in using Windows 95 and Microsoft Office that I started learning about Microsoft DOS, how it worked, and with WordPerfect as well. So when you started working and teaching English to the South Korean people, did you also learn about the Korean language itself?
Oh yeah. And you can't help. I would say Korea is still one of these countries. It's still a country where if you really want to understand the society, you have to learn a certain level of Korean. And also it makes things a lot easier to get around.
Yeah.
However, the interesting part is everything is in English. You get on the subway, you get on a bus, you get on mass transportation, you go into any building, you go to any restaurant, everything is in English and Korean. However, like I said, it's one of these countries where you still have to know, I believe you still have to know a certain level of Korean to kind of fit in, to understand things on a little bit deeper level. When you're educating anywhere from, I would say, university level to corporate, a lot of times you're going to have classes where people are struggling, kind of telling you something, that they're struggling to put words together, they're struggling to express themselves. So to make things a little bit easier and to understand their pain points, knowing some Korean, I believe, was important. And I just learned it kind of naturally by talking to people. I would call it survival Korean.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's beautiful, because I also recognize what I told in the introduction, that you love to dive into people's businesses to understand them, so that you can help them better, right?
Totally.
And you actually already use that quality, that talent, in your teaching business, because you also wanted to understand your students, so that you can advise them better, so you can teach them better. So it was already part of your core, I would say.
I would agree. And I think the same for you. I think you would agree also, Erwin, to understand your client better, you have to deep dive. You have to look below just the surface. And what I found out recently, what I've come to this understanding recently, and for example, right now I'm going through what I would call kind of like a branding change, where I'm pulling apart my social channels. I'm pulling apart things that I have, like yourself, things in your business. And so it's constant recalibration, but I'm pulling them apart and thinking, okay, how is this helping my clients? How is this helping me? Is it really serving me, or am I forcing it too much?
Yeah.
And right. And I think we all go through this, and that's a form, to me, that's a form of huge transformation, where we think we're giving this out to the client, or this out to a lead, a package, an offer. And we say, this is my offer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you start having these deeper conversations where they might be looking for that, but at the same time, there is maybe 1 or 2 or 3 other things that they're looking for also. And we might not be experts in that, but we're able to actually facilitate that for them.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also, I love that you say that when you want to help a client, it doesn't mean that you have to have all the expertise within you, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you be like the spider in the web and you can offer those services and still help the client, that's key, because that's what they actually need.
Completely. I would say if there's a really basic framework for helping any client, it is, number 1, listen. Listen always. Number 2, come up with 1 or 2 points after you're listening to them over and over. Number 3, execute at least those 2 points on a consistent basis. And that's a really simple framework that I think works for any person that is helping clients.
Oh, definitely. And I bet you also have those clients that they love to sell their services or their solution. And what for instance, let's say that you have a web designer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone would come to the web designer and he says, I want a new website, right? And the web designer, a lot of them, they are asking, okay, so what do you need to web shop with it? Do you need a services page? What kind of landing pages do you need? How many? Yet what you already told me, and what I do as well, is first you have to dive into your client's business before you start talking about the solution, right? So
Right.
The first question should be something like, well, I can build your website, but can you first tell me about your business? Why do you think you need a website? Because if there's no system behind it, it's going to be a very expensive digital business card.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I made that mistake the first time, where I had a website built and I didn't know how to utilize it. And I didn't know that there should be something behind it. And then looking back, I realized that the design of the website was partially faulty, but even behind that, I really didn't know how to utilize it. And it's like putting a LinkedIn profile up and not putting a lot of content out, or not I should say not utilizing it.
Yeah. We could have been brothers. I've made the same mistake as well when I started my business, right? We were about this. We were in a pilot program, was about client attracting websites, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to deep dive into your client avatar, build the whole website, and the website was built. And I thought, well, I don't see any clients coming. What's wrong with it? Right? Not knowing that you have to keep adding content, that it will be visible and make it good content so Google will like it and all those things. They didn't told me that. I thought, well, the website is live. It's done. No, it's not done.
Right.
It's just starting.
Right. I thought the same thing. Or when I thought, I'd build it and they'll come. I didn't know that I had to get myself out there on like a platform like LinkedIn or Instagram and form a conversation or awareness of me and my services. That way people would come to me. It's not about people. That way people know about you. And then also there is, cold calling and outreach too. And it's a nonstop service. It's a nonstop two-way communication. And a lot of people, right? You got to learn how to accept no for an answer. A lot of times you got to learn how to reach out to 100 different people and only hear back from 2 or 3. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. So if you can't accept that, then it's a little bit tough.
Oh, definitely.
It's painful.
So Stu, when did you decide to add podcasting to your expertise?
I thought podcasting, out of all the content platforms, when I started podcasting, I was originally doing it as a service for clients. And my service package was, hey, and I still do this today, I will book you on 5 or 6 podcasts a month, take that content, and we'll utilize it on your social media platforms. The reason I think podcasting is a great medium is that what we're doing right now, video-based podcasting, it's not just about the audio. Unfortunately, I also now know that when you mention when you start talking to a potential client and you mention, hey, podcasting over and over and over, I think you get pigeonholed. And I believe there is with some people that are not really up to date on all the different forms of ways you can content repurpose. They only hear podcasting. And right. And so maybe they thinking, okay, I don't want to do podcasting, but I want some content on my YouTube channel. Well, when you start talking their language, right? When you start saying, okay, we're going to take this form of content and we're able to put it on your YouTube channel, then they start understanding you a little bit better. But I started using it as a service. And then I always wanted to start a podcast, like I said, because I think it's a great content platform to really utilize, and it's easy to repurpose too. And that's really one of the reasons I decided to go into podcasting. Unlike making one clip for YouTube, for let's say Instagram, or like let's say Facebook marketing, especially, like if you make a post on Facebook, 9 out of 10 times it's only going to be used on Facebook. And I think that's it. Whereas I would say like YouTube's another platform that I'm eager to start, and because I think you can take that video and strip it down and maybe create some like clips from it to put on your Instagram or something. But I would say overall that's one of the reasons I wanted to start a podcast, and also to interview interesting people and get to know the reasons why they are doing what they do, what pushes them, what are they passionate about, and get those tips to people that don't know those already.
And it's a wonderful medium, right? And it's what I love about it as well is that it's everlasting. Right? You can always find it. You don't need to be present to listen to it, right? Like we had a few months. I'm not even don't know if it's still alive, but with Clubhouse, right? It was this fear of missing out. You had to be there to get the content, and it was invite only, and it was a hype. And I think I haven't heard about it for the last 2 years or so.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's pretty much dead. In other words, I'm sure it still exists, but I don't think it's an active platform.
No. And with podcasts as well as with YouTube videos, it's always there, right? You upload it and it's available. And whether or not you publish an episode this week, in 2 years' time, people can still listen to it.
Totally. And also to add on to that, what's great about podcasting is that it's searchable too. So somebody goes to your podcast link on Apple or Spotify or something, they can search by episode, or they can search by podcast name and find all your episodes from, like you said, from ever. They could go 5 years back. They'll still find them.
Yeah. I also love the way that you were talking about that you're currently in the transformation, right? To see what parts of your business is adding value or what might become obsolete in the end. I did this exercise a few times myself, and I also, when I was doing that exercise myself, I recognized things that I love to do that I already did when I was a child. Does that ring a bell with you as well? That if you think about it, about your childhood, the things you did back then, you're also using in your current business?
Completely. There are several things, again, revisiting them as you get older, where maybe a year ago you didn't recognize it. It didn't click in your brain. But a week ago, all of a sudden, you could be walking down a street, or you could be in a forest somewhere taking a hike, and it clicks, and you remember, I used to like to do this 10 years ago. I used to like to do this, like you said, as a child. One thing I found out about myself recently, or refound, what I like to do as a child was just to be curious. And also, I love going to places during recharge times, which we all need as entrepreneurs. During my recharge times, I like being at a place where there's not a lot of people, and either taking a book, or just walking around, or listening to a couple of podcasts, or watching a few YouTube videos, and just sitting there for a while and just observing what's going on. And I didn't realize it, but I really enjoyed doing that like 20 years ago at the same time. I used to really enjoy, when I was in university, I really enjoyed going to the library by myself, sitting at a table, reading, getting my assignments done, and then also reading. And that's similar to what I like to do now, whereas it's just an empty space. It's I shouldn't say empty, wide open is a better word. Like, not a lot of people around, wide open. You kind of feel freed. You don't feel incumbent by humanity. Yeah.
And that's actually also, I would say, an entrepreneurial trait, to feel free, to experience freedom, so to speak, not to be imprisoned, right?
Right.
Wonderful. One thing I, for instance, had was that I loved helping people, right? When I was young, I was practicing judo. And I still remember when we had to do an exam that sometimes my partner didn't know a certain throw or a certain grip, and I whispered it in his ear. But I guess my whispering skills weren't that developed. So after the exam was over, the trainer most of the time said, "Well, Erwin, I know your past, but your partners should do it themselves." So,
interesting.
I wasn't whispering that good, so to speak.
Interesting.
But it was already, I just loved helping people, right? And it's just like you said, with sharing your knowledge. What good is knowledge if you don't share it, right?
Oh yeah, Erwin, that's 100% correct. It's like you just said, what knowledge is no good if you don't share it. I think it's our responsibility to share it, to help other people. And you're going to run across people that are, when you start getting into lead gen and clients, you're going to meet people that you do onboarding with that are not open to suggestions. They're just not. They have, for better lack of term, mental blocks. I guess you could call them mental blocks up, or
yeah.
Right. Or their stubbornness, or whatever term you want to use. They have a high ego. And then you meet people that are coachable or consultable, and they know that they need to look at things a different way in order to move forward.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think that all comes through pain points, right? We all grow from a pain point, and there's certain people that are the first example I mentioned where they do have a pain point, but they don't know how to get through it and they don't want to. They're just still comfortable. And then there's people that have a pain point and they are sick of having that pain point, and they're willing to listen to us. They're willing to take advice and work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would almost say that that's the difference between a fixed mindset and growth mindset.
Totally.
Right? Fixed mindset is most of the time they feel like a victim, like things happen to them, and they think they can't change it because it's outside of them, right? While the people with the growth mindset, they want to be in full control and they take action, and they are willing to change what's happening to them.
Yes, and a good example of that also, to add on to that, I think, is COVID. We've come out of COVID for the most part. Yes, it still exists. I mean, this nonsense that some people, COVID's gone. Well, it's never gone, but a lot of businesses, I think, are still blaming. I don't want to say, I want to be careful about this. Some businesses might be still saying, well, because of COVID, our business was impacted this way. And yes, some of the decisions they made during that time were perfectly logical. They were perfectly sound. But now that we're out of that, I think that during that time also, the way we sell our services and the way marketing has really changed, where 3 or 4 years ago, everybody was meeting in offices. Everybody was meeting and giving paper presentations, or PowerPoint presentations to each other. But the big part was physical meetings. And I have to get on a plane to go to some convention now. That was really the norm. And it didn't matter what industry you were in. It was, okay, I'm getting on a plane next week to go to this educational convention, or the industry of machinist, or industry of XYZ, some convention wherever. And those are coming back, which is great. However, at the same time, I think those have been changed forever, because people are saying, well, you know what? Now we can do this live for people that want to come, and virtual. At this time.
And it's what you say, especially COVID. I think that's a great example that some people were, of course, COVID had a big impact, right? We can't deny that. Restaurants were closed, businesses were shut down, people weren't allowed to meet and get it together. But on the one hand, you can feel victimized and hoping that things will go back to normal, right? Or you can accept the situation as is and see how you can make the best out of it. Right? And people that are willing to make the best out of it, they're flexible, they're adaptable. They know that the world can change tomorrow. So you have to be willing to adapt your business plan and not keep the old one alive as long as possible, even if it doesn't make any sense.
Totally. Yeah. You mentioned closed mindset. And I think that has a lot of connection. That's a deep connection there, where you think, or somebody thinks, that business will come back to normal. You mentioned coming back to normal also. And I think that was the belief early on. But again, it's easy to believe, isn't it? I think we all have maybe a point in our life where we're like, you know what? I lost 5 clients. Well, you know what? I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and they'll come back. Whereas people are using new techniques now, and newer techniques. One example that comes to mind is, I remember 5 or 6 years ago in the digital marketing field, where, and I'm sure you know this too, where it was really bombarded. Like, people would do a webinar, a 30 to 45 minute free webinar on how to go from like 0 to 20K in a month, just for an example. And when people started coming out with that, it was a very easy way to get people onto your landing page to opt in to watch your webinar and start getting their information. And if you're one of the people that did that at the very beginning, there were some people that grew exponentially. The Russell Brunsons, people like that, they were coming out with those type of training programs again and again and again, just with different subjects, right? And then that started to get really saturated, where now I sometimes see that coming from somebody that's trying to sell their offer, trying to sell their coaching services or their content services, and because I don't think anybody really wants to get on an hour-long webinar. I mean, very few people want to get on an hour-long webinar anymore. They want the content cut up into 2-minute pieces, 30-second reels. Give me the top 5 points. That's all I want. And so it changes dramatically.
Oh yeah. And I would almost say, you can't blame them, but I would almost say that it's a pity to see those people that had those exponential growth. They're now selling the concept they used to get this exponential growth, even though the market is saturated, right?
Yes. And some of them are still doing that at the same time. You're absolutely right. They're like, how to do a webinar that will lead to more clients or sell more products. Yeah. And it's the wrong timing. It's the wrong person. And a lot of them also things they take for granted, they're not telling in those courses. But that might just be the difference between success and failure. I agree. I think a lot of it is I shouldn't say a lot, but like you said, there's points that are not talked about that you have to find out by yourself. One of my biggest pain points when I first started out was I thought, because I was listening to the wrong people, I was listening to the wrong mentor. And one of them was, hey, just farm out all your content. Just go to somebody and have them write it. That way you don't have to spend time on it. You can focus on other things. What I found out was that that's sometimes a bad idea, because, right, it has to start from you. So even if you need to come up with the idea, I think you partially need to start creating the content, and then maybe you can offload it to somebody else. But if you have just somebody do the entire thing, it doesn't come across very well in my point of view.
It's actually what you just shared with us. I would almost say that you should be careful about AI at the moment. Because if you're just letting AI write your content, it's without a soul. And people will feel it when they read it. I'm working with a lady in the US as well, and I tried it once, right, to write an article using AI, and just to test it, I sent it to her and asked her about her opinion, and she said, "Well, it's good, but I missed the urban part."
Yes.
Right. And that's because the content was great, right? But it just missed that secret sauce that you put into it without realizing it. And that's what you said as well, right?
Pretty much. I think it's the same thing. It used to be, just have somebody write it. Now it's have AI write it.
Yeah.
Or create it. I think we're moving to platforms. I think pretty soon you're going to see kind of like all-in-one service platforms where you will tell the compute, you will tell the AI, or you will instruct it to record a video, and at the same time make 10 reels based on whatever you're going to make it on. And I think we're going to start seeing those sometime soon. But you're right when it comes to AI. I think about, you can't let it do everything. There are some parts that it does take the time away from, and those would be getting, like an outline done or coming up with some ideas, but you have to expand upon those ideas too.
Yeah, definitely. So, Stu, I wanted to ask you one question. It's burning in my mouth. I already wanted to ask it at the beginning.
Thank you.
Could you share one of your success stories about your client? Because we all know that once you see your client grow and reach a level, it makes you proud. It fills you inside as well.
Sure. No problem. One of my first clients, this is when I was solely booking people on podcasts. That was my only service I was doing. So my offer went like this. I would get a client, I would create their pitch sheet. I would do 2 to 3 weeks of pure podcast research. So again, a lot of people would be like, how do you get on a podcast? Because they could not contact a podcaster. And once you learn how to do that, yes, there is some digging for podcasters that are not on a podcast platform, right?
Yeah.
That's one of them. But the other one is that if they're not on there, especially, you have to dig for information. You just have to. I would specialize like, hey, these 30 podcasts, perfect match for you. And then we can expand upon that. So one of my first successes was that I booked him on I think it was like his 3rd or 4th podcast he was on. I booked him on a top 10 podcast. And nice. we were doing a service base. So like he was helping me with mentorship. I was helping him with podcasting. Mm-hmm. This is before I even got paid. I was not, but it was worth it. I was like, you know what? And I created his pitch sheet for him and I did everything. And so that was a real success for me because I wasn't sure at the time I could really do it. And I was able to complete that. So that was a huge success.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially top 10 podcasts. That's amazing, Stu.
Thank you. Yeah, I was like, wow. And it was funny because I didn't know it was in the top 10 until I looked at one of the, what do you call it? It's like a podcasting source where you go and it says, it kind of tells by this many listeners.
Yeah.
It was a ranking website.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Stu, I think we can talk hours about all the subjects we're more or less in the same business with different angles.
Sure.
But if you could share one tip or little piece of wisdom with the audience about entrepreneurship or about following your passion, what would it be?
Sure. Okay. 2 tips that I have actually are always be willing to transform yourself. Transformation can occur at any level. It's really up to you. Like Erwin was mentioning, that fixed versus growth mindset, always be willing to have a growth mindset. And part of that, I want to say, is that read books that are valuable, take the stuff from those books, implement it into your skill set. So if you don't know how to do something, read a book on it that actually lays out sales or copy or something and implement that into your skill set. And then the other one is just, even when you doubt yourself and even when you don't feel like getting up in the morning, or even when you feel like not working, you have to learn how to get through that. And if that means just doing input for a day and very little output, that's okay. It's only one day. There's only today, there's no yesterday, and there's no tomorrow. And if you have that kind of mindset, it will get you through all times. Perfect
tips, Stu. And like I'm used to, you're just over delivering.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate it.
So Stu, if people want to know more about you or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Since I'm going through some transformation in terms of my channels right now, number one, you can look me up on LinkedIn at Stuart McConnell. You can find me there. There might be some changes next time you look me up. Number 2, you can look me up on Instagram at Guestsounds with a capital G. and you can find me there, and you can reach out. You can message me, or feel free to message, get in touch with me on there.
Perfect. Well, let's follow your transformations too. Looking forward to it. It was great having you in the show, and let's keep in touch.
Erwin, always a pleasure talking with you. Like you said, we could talk for hours. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.